Welcome to the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Podcast. I'm Kate Moore-Youssef, and I'm a wellbeing and lifestyle coach, EFT practitioner, mum to 4 kids, and passionate about helping more women to understand and accept their amazing ADHD brains. After speaking to many women just like me, and probably you, I know there is a need for more health and lifestyle support for women newly diagnosed with ADHD. In these conversations, you'll learn from insightful guests, hear new findings, and discover powerful perspectives and lifestyle tools to enable you to live your most fulfilled, calm, and purposeful life wherever you are on your ADHD journey. Here's today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome back to the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Podcast. And today we have a guest from Australia, and her name is Faye Lawrence, and she is the founder of Untoxicated, Australia's largest alcohol-free social community with around 10,000 members. And having been a heavy but high-functioning drinker since her teens, Faye wound up in inpatient detox in late 2017 after the wheels really fell off. And determined not to let her sobriety ruin her social life, Untoxicated was born. Faye is a TEDx speaker, co-author, and has widely featured across different media. A social butterfly and a bit of an idealist, she believes in a world where everyone belongs and advocates to normalise living alcohol-free and reduce stigma around addiction. And with Faye's lifelong fascination with human behaviour, led her to study in psychology, coaching, and counselling. I know this all very well. And she now works with people who want to change their relationship with alcohol. And interestingly, Faye was also diagnosed with ADHD at the ripe old age of 48 and is passionate about creating awareness about the strong link between ADHD and alcohol dependence in the hope it might help reduce similar pitfalls for other women. I think this conversation is going to be so helpful. Faye, thank you so much for reaching out, and I'm just delighted to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, Kate. I'm really excited to be here. Yeah.
Well, and interesting, when you sent me that message, it had been on my radar that I'd not done a conversation about specifically alcohol addiction. I know I mention addiction a lot in lots of different podcast episodes. And, I see it manifest in so many different ways. Even just today, I was having a chat with a client, and hers was more of an exercise addiction. And I was trying to explain to her that the addiction, it doesn't matter what the addiction is. It's the reason why the addiction is there. And
Yeah.
so many people go through, alcohol dependence, drugs, shopping, gambling, sex, exercise, whatever that looks like, because we don't understand the ADHD is there. And so we've spent possibly all our lives trying to understand the addiction, trying to heal from the addiction. And it's
Yeah.
just this cycle that we can't break. And then when we get the ADHD awareness and we understand how it all manifests in our brain with the dopamine seeking and the fact that we can't retain the dopamine, which is why we're on this sort of addictive kind of juggernaut, it really helps a lot of people and gives people a lot of validation. So I think this is really a very much needed conversation. Thank you so much for bringing awareness to it.
Yeah, thank you. I feel particularly passionate about this subject with the experiences that I've had. And I really do think it's so interesting, Kate, because I'm coming up, well, I'm 5 years sober now. I'm past 5 years sober. And so obviously with Untoxicated, as well as my friends outside of that, and more broadly in the sober community or the alcohol-free community or the sober curious, which, wherever, whatever terms work, everyone's getting diagnosed with ADHD. I kid you not. I would say probably about 80% of my friends have had late diagnosis in the past 12 months.
Yeah.
It's just blown my mind, Yeah, it's incredible.
What's fascinating is that I hear this a lot, that people are seeing sort of like old school addiction specialists, psychiatrists, psychologists, who aren't making that connection, who aren't understanding how profound addiction is within the ADHD spectrum, without understanding to even start looking for signs and traits. And they're feeling really, really let down. They're feeling let down by people who they believe should know this, should make these connections. And yes, that healing can take place without an ADHD awareness. But I wonder, how much easier it would have been maybe for you to have understood the roots of your addiction and understood that, yes, I do understand that trauma is hugely involved with addiction,
Yeah.
but also understanding that there were certain elements of it that we had no control over, and it was an ADHD brain. How does that
Yes.
impact you on your journey?
Oh, I mean, I only got the diagnosis July last year, so I'm still in the thick of the roller coaster of trying to come to terms with it all, accepting, going, right, okay, what does this mean for me now? But there was a period there of, I was really angry because, I've seen a lot of mental health professionals over the years. I've studied psych myself. I was seeking help for alcohol on and off for 17 years. And not once in my many, many interactions with any of those services did anyone say, or did I ever hear, that ADHD might be a possibility. And it makes me angry. It does, because, as we know, addiction doesn't just impact the individual, it impacts their whole family. And there is that sense of, had this been picked up earlier, things could have been different. But I think also what you mentioned there is really important, because there is a sense of validation also of, but of course, like this was, it's like I've sort of been saying to some people, it's not your fault, it's your ADHD. So of course you're going to experience addiction in some form, like you mentioned, Kate, with its shopping, gaming, drugs, alcohol, sex, shopping. And that part does feel quite validating to me of, yeah, this was kind of a foregone conclusion almost. But also, I've got addiction in my family, and once I got my diagnosis, I was able to look back and go, oh my God, like literally everybody in my family is neurodiverse. And it made me much more, I'm not sure if giving's the right word, but it made me much more understanding of other people who were the adults in my life as a child who were also experiencing addiction, to go, okay, that really makes sense now as well.
Yeah, being able to look through the lens of compassion and forgiveness when you can understand where it's come from, as opposed to it being like you're just, a shit show. You've just
Yeah,
ramrailed your whole life. Like, why have you not got control? And
yeah.
it gives the family that kind of like softening, because yes,
Mm.
there has been all that dysfunction and chaos, but it gives us more of an understanding. And I really do hope that as things progress and the understanding of neurodiversity and addiction, like I had I don't know if you listened to the episode with Sarah Templeton, and she is amazing, and she's been sort of shouting about the connection between addiction and ADHD for years. And
Right.
another one of her kind of like things that she's very passionate about is screening. As soon as someone goes into prison service, into any police custody, anything like that, especially if there's drugs, anything involved, screen them for ADHD so they can
Yeah.
get the help. They're not reoffending, they're not going back to drugs. And it's just such a simple, relatively inexpensive assessment to do, but the
Mm.
impact can be huge. I mean, how does that impact you with the work that you do now in your community? Are you coming out and talking a lot about your ADHD, and is that helping lots of people in your community?
I have spoken about it, yeah, a few times since I got the diagnosis. I'm also mindful, though, that, not everyone that has a problematic relationship with alcohol necessarily has ADHD, and vice versa. So, I don't want to kind of tar everyone with the same brush, I suppose. But, what we do know as well is that even people who, aren't at that pointy end of being addicted, and alcohol use disorder is a spectrum. What we know is, like, even people that aren't quote unquote addicted are more prone to binge drinking, for example. The effects of alcohol are more significant as a teenager. So teens in particular they're hugely susceptible, and usually if the drinking, drugs, whatever it is, starts at that age, it means that, there's worse outcomes for them. They're much more likely to get addicted. People who do get addicted or do fall on that alcohol use disorder, if they have ADHD, they're much more likely to fall in the chronic alcohol use disorder eventually. Their period of addiction goes on for much longer. If they do go into seek help, they often don't sustain that. And so, you're kind of really up against it. You're kind of really up against it because of the ADHD, particularly if you're undiagnosed. So we've had some clinical guidelines, the first ever released in Australia late last year, and that was one of the recommendations, was the clinical recommendations around screening in prisons and screening in inpatient facilities, detox, rehab, all of those sorts of things. Whether we see that happen, because I think it's like I made some notes here with the research. 30% of people in treatment centres have ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised. I would think it's probably more, but
well, that's diagnosed.
Okay, yeah. So I'm kind of like wondering, is the self-medication of using alcohol for that, is that something that you can relate to as well, as opposed to it being something that we're almost unconsciously doing?
Oh my God,
People
so
recognizing
much.
the connection that I'm not living an authentic life, or I'm suppressing and burying deep trauma, and that's why I need my drink.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think a lot of times people, whether they realise it or not, are drinking to tolerate a life that they actually are not happy in. And whether that's in a marriage, like you say, I think that happens to a lot of people, is that the drink is the thing that numbs them out, that goes, okay, I'll deal with it tomorrow. Like it's, and it's sort of an avoidance tactic. But certainly around all these other things that you mentioned around trauma, mental health. So for me, when I first started drinking, I was probably, I was like a lot of families in the UK. It was a boozy thing. That's what we did every time we got together. It was, and then all chuck the Beatles on and have a dance around the lounge room type of thing. And so you're kind of indoctrinated as well from a familial and cultural perspective in both Australian and the UK culture. But it was when I first had a drink, a proper drink, and got really hammered. I was probably about 13, and just the sense of relief. I mean, I can still remember it to this day. The sense of relief that I could switch my head off.
Yeah.
And now I look back and go, that was ADHD. Because my head was just constantly frigging pinging around. And then later on, huge anxiety. Anxiety's been a problem for me my whole life. The social anxiety was off the charts. And it's something that, people who come to Untoxicated or come to coaching, social anxiety is almost always in the picture, regardless of ADHD or otherwise. And I absolutely did, because you might have an episode or something where your anxiety's been really bad, or there's been a situation where, I used to avoid going to supermarkets and things like that because I was too, like, oh my God, I might bump into someone, and then I'd be panicky, and then it would like, oh my God, they know. And then your nervous system is so activated, you feel like you need the alcohol to bring it back down. And then you become reliant on that to bring it back down. And so you get to, I'm 40, I've never learned any healthy coping mechanisms. They were never modelled to me either, because there was addiction in my family. And then when you stop drinking, you're like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, how do I operate in the world? I've got none of the tools here. But interestingly enough, I did that. That was when you've then got that clarity and you can see things without the alcohol. That was when I was like, something isn't right here, because everyone else was in the sober community and intoxicated, springing out of bed at 6 a.m. and going for runs and, talking about, oh God, how their mental health was so fantastic now and they didn't have anxiety and, all these are massive, amazing benefits. And I'm like, oh my God, none of this. I don't feel calm. I never feel calm in my body or my mind. I've got combined type and I'm the more severe end. And yeah, I was like, this isn't right that my body is constantly in this state of feeling activated, and my mind just never shuts off. And it's exhausting. And like many people here, I had the boom bust, work, go, doing so much, overwhelm, crash. But I always just put that down to, oh God, just so much, like, oh, you're lazy, you're a failure, why can't you do what everyone else can do? You're flaky, you've got too many things, you jump from thing to thing. And the alcohol as well is used to deal with those negative feelings that you have about yourself, because you feel like a piece of shit and you feel like you're constantly lagging behind, you feel like you're not good enough, you feel like I just want something to take this away for a minute. And then it develops into the sort of few glasses after work, few glasses of wine after work with your mates. Then before you know it, like I say, it's an addictive substance. It's progressive. So women listening to this podcast who might go, oh, that's not relevant to me, that really doesn't apply to me, and I'm sticking to my wine, and that's absolutely fair enough, by the way. But just know that it can. I never thought I'd end up in the position that I ended up either.
So you went into an inpatient facility.
Yeah.
And that was in 2017.
That's right.
Do you mind me asking how old your kids were at that time?
No, not at all. So my kids were, oh God. So one's coming up 24 and the other one's 26. So they were adults. But interestingly enough, there are things, like in COVID, for example, a lot of people, the wheels fell off them with their drinking because they didn't have those protective factors in place, like going out to work. They were suddenly at home. And so I'd lost a lot of protective factors. I was working from home. My kids had left home, so it was just me living by myself. I'd had a relationship breakup. Things had been going south for a while. I mean, this had been, the writing was on the wall for quite some time. And that was when the day drinking started, and I was waking up and drinking. But for the most period of my drinking career, as I call it, I was high functioning. I was going out to work. I was a single parent with the kids. I was, doing so much. And it was really that last 12 to 24 months, I'd say, by my standards, by anyone else's standards, they may have looked at me and gone, Christ, you're throwing up at work after you've been out on the turfs the night before. That's not cool. Oh, you're crashing in the car, as in not crashing the car, but sleeping in the car at lunchtime or going for hair of the dog. And but I was still performing.
So, I mean, it feels, first of all, I just want to send you so much compassion, because I know, obviously, you're sober now and you're now helping lots of other people. But when you talk about that version of yourself, it still feels quite raw. And it's like, you can describe it so well, like it almost feels like it was, yesterday. And I guess, on your sobriety journey, are you always very aware of that, of how you were? And I guess, how did you make that step? How did you, how has it been for you now, especially because you didn't have the ADHD diagnosis when you went sober and you were in that facility?
Yeah.
How did you do it?
I think, and it's what I see with my clients as well, is that there comes a tipping point where, in the stages of change, you're ready, and it's where the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change. That's it. And I was worried that something really bad was going to happen to me. Things were a hopeless state by then, for me. And I think the thing was, I just admitted to myself at that point that things were out of control. I'd always been able to, up until that point, go, oh, it's all right, everyone does it, and it's just a big night out. And then, like, literally hours of the night just completely gone, no memory whatsoever. And that was quite normal for me, and also the people that I hung out with, who were also professionals. So it's not like it's birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah.
So it becomes normal. We were all doing it. And yeah, when I really threw my hands up and went, oh, I can't keep doing this. It's not helping with the anxiety. It's not fun. There's all the things that I'm using it for are just not working now, and haven't been for some time. And yeah, it was just, honestly, it was absolutely terrifying, because I was like, how am I going to do life? I just really didn't know. I really didn't know how I was going to do life. Like, how do you socialise without alcohol? How the hell? How do you adult? How do you do anything? Really, everything I did involved alcohol in some way, shape or form, for most things. And yeah, I just honestly didn't know. And yeah, going into detox was the best thing that could have happened to me. I was like in there for about 5 or 6 days, came out, never had another drink. I was like, that's it. That is it. I am not going to be a statistic. This is where the stubbornness kicked in.
Yeah.
I was like, right. And yeah, and that shifted my mindset.
So if you're listening to today's podcast and you're finding it really helpful, I would love it if you could jump onto wherever you're listening to the episode and leave a review, a rating. This really helps with other people like yourself find the podcast. Perhaps they are just on the beginning of their journey and are desperate for help and resources, and this podcast can really help with that. And if you are looking for further support, please do head to my website, which is adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk. On there, I have lots of workshops, resources, information. It's both paid for and for free. My aim is to really help you and guide you on this journey and allow you to access whatever you can find that will help you where you are right now. So that's adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk. Now back to today's episode. So I'm kind of thinking that the hard thing with alcohol is it's so ritualistic, isn't it? It's so
Mm-hmm.
ingrained in society, and it's so ingrained in our habits, our socializing, our behavior. And like you say, to how am I going to do life without alcohol?
Yeah.
Just thinking about going out for dinner or meeting with a friend or talking at a party, just holding a glass in your hand is kind of like that social kind of comfort. And I can only imagine that people fall by the wayside. If people aren't ready to be part of your journey, or you're mirroring back to them, projecting to them what they already know, but they're not willing to accept or see. So it must
Massively.
be, I mean, first of all, like amazingly life-changing that you were at that bathroom floor moment, you hit rock bottom
Yeah.
and you
Yeah, I
were
did.
able to come back from that. But also, I mean, did you see people that you used to hang out with just fall by the wayside? Was there that situation, or did you have support there?
I yeah, look, I mean, people that I was in detox with went straight to the bottle shop after being released. And addictions that's the off license, by the way, for anyone listening in the
Yeah,
UK.
yeah.
It's because they're called bottle shops here. But look, and that was one of the things that was actually incredibly motivating to me when I was in there. Was because I was studying psych, I'd actually just finished the degree. I was really interested in the data that was up there, and it spoke about how many times people came back, how many people were still sober at the end of the year after being released. And it was just like, I couldn't believe the amount of times people went in. They would go out, they'd come back in, they'd go out, they'd come back in. And I couldn't believe as well how many people were still not sober after the year. And I just went, that's it. There's no way I'm going to be on that board as someone who didn't make it, who didn't, and I just had enough by then as well. Like I say, I scared myself. I scared myself with how bad that got. Different people in terms of some of the friends that I used to have at that point. I'm still friends with some of them. Other people, it's fallen by the wayside. You quickly are able to see people that still want to hang out with you if you're not drinking, maybe in a different capacity. And I don't have a lot of judgment about that, because I was that person also.
Mm-hmm.
And I certainly don't want to be out here and being the alcohol police and saying, but it's incredibly difficult for people. The research bears this out for socialising, and what happens is they either relapse or slip, whatever term you want to use, or they become socially isolated. They stay at home. And so I was like, no, I do not accept that, this is ridiculous. And that's why I started Untoxicated, because I was like, this is what I need, and there must be other people out there like me. And we host the sober alcohol-free events. You don't have to be sober 24/7, but it just gave people some way of, even if they don't want to be sober for a long time, or they're just having a break, or they're having a health kick, whatever it is, a choice that was not putting your hand up and going, yeah, I'm defective, my name's Faye and I'm a fucker, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
Excellent. I wish I'd known that earlier.
I always say swear away.
Swear away. I should have known from the previous ones that I've listened to.
We'll drop a few F-bombs in between. I'll edit them in, don't worry.
Oh, excellent. What was I saying?
No, but I think I was actually going to ask you about, AA. And I know that obviously there's a huge amount of confidentiality and all of that. And again, because I've never been part of that, but I know enough to know that I don't know if neurodiversity is addressed at all in AA meetings. And again, because it's quite an old institution, I know incredibly helpful for a lot of people.
Yes.
And I've heard Gabor Mate talk about AA, and he says they don't address trauma.
Oh.
So we're talking about an institution that has indeed, supported and helped people, but again, they're not addressing trauma and they're not addressing neurodiversity. There's a lot there that needs updating. Is that, I don't know, because I'm not part of that world, is that a right thing to say or not?
Well, this is my personal opinion. Look, I tapped into AA a little bit in the beginning, and I did find it helpful. And what I found helpful about it was being around other people who understood. That was hugely powerful. And I would imagine it's much like when you in your wellbeing collective community, just being around other people who get it, who have had similar life experiences, feeling understood, is so hugely powerful and comforting. So that was beneficial, but I'd come out like seething a lot of the time because, not trauma informed, not strengths based. I don't want to bag AA, and the reason why is I think whatever people do that works for them, good luck to them. If it's hopping on one leg and that works for you, great. And I would never want to deter someone from trying things that might work for them, but I think there's a lot of shame-based language, there's a lot of shame-based practice, and because it's grounded in religion at the end of the day, and I know it's a higher power of your choice, absolutely, but some of the central tenets of it echo that kind of dogmatic approach. And I think when people are at that point where they want to make changes, they've had enough of feeling ashamed, of feeling less than, of feeling guilty about who they are. I personally then don't want to go, when I'm trying to make a positive step, and talk about my defects of character. I personally don't want to be described as, an unfortunate. The language to me is just appalling, personally. But I really feel that it works for some, but then definitely needs to be alternatives. And while Untoxicated is not a recovery program, if you are someone who wants to make changes to your alcohol consumption and you are not in a recovery program, you need things like that, where you can be around other people who are in a similar situation, or like-minded. And also you need to be able to have fun, because this experience is pretty gnarly. It's pretty gnarly. You've got to be able to have a laugh. You've got to be able to... How do you learn how to be in restaurants without alcohol unless you've got opportunities to do that in a way that feels safe, psychologically safe? How are you able to then rewire those neural pathways unless you're exposed to those experiences and can kind of go, yep, it's okay. Actually, I've had a really good time. I can do this. And look, there's other people around me. I don't necessarily know their alcohol stories, but they're all, high functioning people, and they've got families, and so it's not just me, because all this stuff that's hidden, and that we don't speak about, like mental health used to be 20 years ago, we need to bring out of the shadows to go, look, this stuff is part of the human experience for pretty much everybody in some shape or form. Let's stop pretending it's not. Whether it's addiction, whether it's mental health, whether it's neurodiversity, whether it's DV, all of these things. And can we take the elephant out of the room and just get real about this stuff, and then we might actually be able to get people help sooner, and support and access to the things that they need, and they can show up in the world as who they need to be and who they are.
I mean, absolutely, and beautifully said, because it's breaking down these stigmas and the taboos now. And I think I just get this collective feeling that people are just sick of it. People are just sick of having to hide and mask. And I think maybe that COVID is sort of exaggerated it for everybody as well. And maybe COVID gave everyone a reason to be a bit more open on social media, open about their mental health, because it was a fucking shit show for everybody, and certain people dealt with it in different ways. But it enabled people to really talk and say, I'm really struggling. I mean, this has been really hard. So now that we've kind of broken down that initial layer of vulnerability, I think the reason why, ADHD diagnoses have gone up something like 400% in 2 years. Wow. So that's because the awareness. I'm not saying that people are magically, getting ADHD. It's because people are understanding, because the awareness is there, people are talking about it. And like you say, mental health 20 years ago was a taboo, subject. It was embarrassing. It's like, we all knew people that struggled. We all had people in our family, but they were the crazy ones, the weird ones, the ones, the ones that, were a bit strange. And now, with addiction, sobriety, the fact that the word sober curious is now, the hashtags all over social media just showing, and I'm in my, 40s, my early 40s, and I know that people in their 20s are just like, you know what, I don't drink. I don't want to drink. It's not my bag. I'd prefer to do this. I prefer to do that. And there's not the same shame, but whereas I think we've been brought up in society in just this different way where alcohol was just always part of it. And it was just, and the shame if there's an issue where we don't want to drink, or why don't you drink? And this, it's definitely, I think, a generational thing, maybe for us. But I
Yeah.
wonder, again, if you're in your 20s, is being sober curious, is not drinking just out of choice because maybe you notice that your anxiety is a lot worse. You notice that you can't get up and have that run in the morning, or you're not able to run your business. And there's not that shame that we held on to, as our generation.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors at play there. I mean, yes, young people are turning away from alcohol. Doesn't mean they're not doing drugs. Doesn't mean that they're actually doing drugs instead, though. Young people will be young people. But yes, I do definitely think that these things are breaking down. And look, just even in the 5 years that I've been alcohol free, I've seen a massive change in acceptability around the sober curious movement, around alcohol free products. So for me, it was always about inclusion, but it's showing that there's lots of reasons that people are once upon a time it used to be, if you don't drink, you are definitely someone who's had a problem. Like it was a given. Now that's not the case at all, I don't think. I think so many more people are, especially when they get to their 40s, because we are the cohort 40 to 55 of we are the worst in terms of the drinking, particularly women. It's really, really massively come up for women. And it's no surprise, particularly with the ADHD, because you're juggling so much. You're in a constant state of overwhelm, and so of course you're going to want something to, the kids have gone to bed, you're like, the witching hour, you're cooking, it's dinner, and you're just like, oh God, I've just got to get through this. Like, I've already done a day at work. This is...
that glass of wine,
that glass of
it's
wine.
Like a hot bath, it's like a warm hug.
Yeah.
It's great. And then it's like, okay, you're going to have one glass and that's fine. But if that goes to a bottle, then it's kind of, okay, we've got a problem. I think it's interesting, like, if someone's listening to this right now and they enjoy drink and they perhaps use alcohol as a crutch in social situations. We know that social anxiety and ADHD go hand in hand. What's that tipping point? What's the tipping point where we should worry, or we just enjoy having a couple of glasses of wine and we're quite happy with that?
Yeah, I think we can quote the DSM, but I think it's actually in some ways a little bit more simple than that. And by the way, I am not anti-alcohol at all. I am not anti people should all be sober, no one should drink. I absolutely believe people should have autonomy over their own bodies. So I've never taken an anti-alcohol approach in any of the things that I've done. But I think that, when you're spending a lot of time thinking about drinking, recovering from drinking, planning how you can possibly get more in, and that might just be things like, you've gone in around with people and you've knocked yours back super quick and you're kind of like, oh God, I want another drink, but it's going to look bad because I'm going up to the bar and like everyone else is like a third of their drink in. It's these sorts of things. Like, are you, regularly turning up to work hungover? When you do drink, are you drinking a lot more or even, a little bit more than you had hoped, and are you doing that on a regular basis? But I think personally a really key indicator is, do you have any shame and guilt around your drinking? Do you have shame and guilt around your drinking? Because people who are moderate drinkers don't. They can take it or leave it, whereas without fail, someone who has a problematic relationship with alcohol, and for some people that might just be going out binging once a week, or it might just be going over the top once a month, or it might be it's really like half a bottle a night. It's so different for different people. So are you experiencing those feelings of self-loathing, of shame, remorse, guilt, those negative feelings after you drink? And also, are you showing up in your life in integrity as the person you want to be, as a parent, as a friend, or is alcohol impeding that in any way? I kind of think these are the better questions to ask, as opposed to, let's look at how many drinks you're having and there's a criteria of, if you're X, it's a problem, or you get this label. I think it's actually bringing it back to like, is alcohol serving me, or am I serving alcohol? And for a lot of people, because it is progressive, and so I was a high functioning drinker for a long time. I was just the party, still going out to, I had a career, I was studying psych, I had 2 kids, I was doing all the things, I had a mortgage, high functioning, which a lot of people are. You don't have to be the brown paper bag on a park bench scenario. And that's not the reality for most people. Most of my clients that come to me are professionals. They're at the top of the game. It's the thing that goes on behind closed doors. They might not necessarily have ADHD though, but there's always mental health stuff in the picture. And I think really, am I a better person with it or without it?
Can I ask, as we sort of begin to close the conversation, are you on medication? Do you take ADHD medication? And has that helped you with your addiction?
I mean, because it hasn't been in the mix, the addiction side of things for, that 5 years, I never feel like I'm on the precipice of going back to drinking or anything like that. Like, because I've gained so much, for me, I always say it's like the portal to growth. Sobriety for me, for people that have a history of drinking quite a bit, but I am on the meds. Look, it's been mixed, I've got to be honest. I was really disappointed because I'd read all these things that people were saying about, oh, it's like the light bulb switches on, and I really had high hopes. So I'm on my 3rd stim now. I'm on Dex. I've tried Ritalin and Vyvanse. I'm not sure what that's called in the UK.
No, it's the same.
Okay. And
I mean, we hear this a lot. Sometimes it works brilliantly, medication, and sometimes it doesn't. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to make this podcast, is I wanted to give people an alternative or different insights or new ways. And I guess that medication can be fantastic, but if it doesn't work, we have to kind of start opening and being curious about other ways. And I guess what's helped you, if the medication's not been that lifeline, what's helped you from a lifestyle perspective stay? I know that obviously you just said that the being sober has been such a, I guess just being sober and seeing what potentially could have happened is enough to keep you, not drinking. But what do you do for yourself to stay healthy? I mean, you look fantastic. Have you got any tips for anybody who's thinking, what, maybe I'm not at that point, but I can really relate to a lot of what you're saying, and they're looking at reducing alcohol or stopping alcohol? Anything that you could offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I will say is that people who don't have a problem with alcohol don't question whether they have a problem with alcohol. So I never, for example, question my gambling habits, because I never gamble. I might gamble once a year. It doesn't even enter my mind. And if it is entering your mind, there's a reason that you are questioning. And that's your inner knowing, it's your inner voice, it's telling you something. So I would just say have a sense of curiosity about that. For me, what has really, really helped has been the gains that I've made in terms of and this is going to sound really cheesy, but my relationship with myself. So I've done a lot of self-development over the years, done a lot of therapy, all that sort of jazz, and none of the lessons really stuck for me until I stopped drinking. Because I never had the clarity. I never had the ability to distance myself from my thoughts, to pause before, my impulsivity and my volatility and all of those things were much lessened when I stopped drinking. They were still there, but they were definitely less. And I was able to actually start building a relationship and liking myself, which again sounds really cheesy, but before I stopped drinking, people would talk about self-love and all of these things, and I was like, how on earth do you do that stuff? Like, I wouldn't have a clue. But it has been the portal for growth for me. And what I would say to women is that we're trying to cultivate better relationships with ourselves, and sometimes we really get in our own way by self-sabotaging behaviours that we're just used to doing. They're habit forming, they impact the brain. Of course we're going to. So it's not about being punitive and being tough on yourself. It's about showing yourself compassion. You've done the best you can. But I do all the things. I do the yoga, I do the getting out into nature, I make time for relationships that are important to me. I try and keep my stress levels, to some degree. Sleep's still rubbish.
Yeah, because it's important to be honest, isn't it? It's important to show that, we haven't figured it all out, and it can be hard. And we're on this journey, and each year we learn more and we have more awareness and new things come to light. And hopefully you will find sleep again. Maybe that might come in for different things. I think a lot of women might want to be, interested in how you work, and maybe if they're not based in Australia, can they still work with you?
Absolutely.
What options have people got?
I do it all over Zoom. So they're more than welcome to, send me or get on the website, whatever they want, or hit me up on socials. The way that I coach is very much based on the individual. Like, I don't have a formulaic approach, because I just don't think a formulaic approach works. So you've got to look at, I sort of say it's a bit like personal training, but around your alcohol side of things. So it's just working with people and the life that they actually lead, as opposed to some kind of ideal scenario that we would like to have. And I do work with people as well that, just want to have a break, or that just want to cut back. So I'm all about meeting people where they're at, not forcing them into, obviously everyone should be sober, because I don't believe that they should. I think it's up to the individual.
What's your website, Faye?
It's Faye, Faye, Lawrence with a W, .com.au.
Okay. All right. I'm going to make sure all the information's in the show notes, because I really want people to be able to access you and access your coaching and your service and your community, because I think what you're doing is really, really powerful and really important. And I just want to thank you so much for sharing your story and being really open and honest, because I'm sure, even though you've probably talked about it a lot, it's still, it's still really a vulnerable story. So, and I know full well that you will be resonating with a lot of people, or a lot of people will be resonating with you.
Yeah. And I really hope that anyone, who, I just hope the message reaches people around this particular topic, because I really feel like it's so important. And I feel like women beat themselves up a lot about some of this stuff, and sometimes there's all these underlying reasons. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. But it, unfortunately, like I say to my clients, no one's coming to save us, so we have to do the work. Annoyingly, but we have to be the ones to do we need to be the work.
We need to be the ones, the knight in shining armour for ourselves, like you say. No, let's not wait for anyone to help us. Faye, thank you so much.
Thank you,
I really
Kate.
appreciate it, and hopefully we'll speak again very soon.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope you found what you were looking for in this conversation, and it's helped guide you towards some further self-healing, self-exploration, and most importantly, self-acceptance. And if you have enjoyed this conversation and would like to experience more of my work, such as access to exclusive live workshops and opportunities for group coaching sessions, connecting with other like-minded women, and a general feeling of belonging, please come and check out my monthly membership, the ADHD Women's Wellbeing Collective. I've made it as affordable as possible, and I offer you lots of resources and opportunities for connection and support from other women all around the world being diagnosed with ADHD later on in life. I'd absolutely love to see you there. All the details are in this episode's show notes or on my website, adhdwomenswellbeing.co.uk. See you in the next episode.